welcome to China EVs and More, talk where my co-host Lei Xing and I will go over some of the week's most important news coming out of the China EV, AV, and mobility sectors. We plan to be here for about an hour and a half, and we'll open the room up at around the 40-minute mark to anyone who's keen to ask us any questions. So please raise your hand early if there's something you want to say. One rule, we appreciate vigorous debate, but let's all be considerate and respectful to each other. What Lei and I discuss over the next hour or so is based on our opinions and should not be taken as investment advice. We encourage those who enjoy this room to please connect with us on Clubhouse, LinkedIn, and follow us on Twitter. Please also promote this room to your friends, and of course, tune in again next week if you enjoy it. My name is Tu Li, and I'm the founder and managing director at Sino Auto Insights, a Beijing-based consultancy that helps organizations bring innovative and tech-focused products and services to the transportation and mobility markets. I write a free weekly newsletter that we pull many of our discussion topics from. You can sign up for it on sinoautoinsights.com, which I encourage you all to do. Lei, can you please introduce yourself?
Yes, good evening from my side. My name is Lei Xing, and I'm the former chief editor of China Auto Review, which published newsletters and a tabloid magazine in English focused exclusively on the Chinese auto industry. I've spent most of the last 20 years on the ground in China covering the industry. I'm now in the US working as an independent analyst, consultant, freelance, still trying to keep tabs on the rapidly evolving market. This week, we are talking Tesla, NIO, and Skyworth. And here I go. Tesla protest gate at the Shanghai Auto Show becomes International Mystery of the Year. NIO way to Norway is the new way to European way. And is Sky
You just made
worth
that
it? I just made up some headlines.
Oh, oh man! So we're getting into cheese making now. Okay, that's cool, man.
I just made up some.
Let's start out with NIO though. Let's
clickbait
yeah, we
headlines.
just got off the. So we just got off the earnings call. It's still going on, but for those that did not know, NIO's earnings call for Q1 of 21 is right now. It's going on right now. It's probably on the tail end. So Lei, what were the things that stood out for you as part of the earnings call while you're on it?
Well, I guess there were a few points that were interesting. When I got off and get on Clubhouse, William Li, the CEO, he just made a comment about the Shanghai Auto Show. He went to check out all of the competing models that he said was valuable to check out. And he thought the most impressive model, and this was a surprise to me, he said the most impressive model was the Wuling Hongguang Baojun Kiwi based on the E300. Not the Hongguang Mini EV, the Cabrio, but the Kiwi that's selling for like $10,000. And he said that was impressive.
Yeah.
So that was a little bit surprising. And then the other one, I guess, was yesterday they announced the NIO Park, NEO Park, not NIO Park. He specifically emphasized this point. So basically, this park, NIO Park, has a capacity of 1 million units. And I had tweeted out saying that this will be 3 times the Volkswagen MEB plant in Shanghai and also twice the Tesla Giga Shanghai capacity. And then he sort of made it, well, he didn't specifically say that other people will use this capacity. He said, if we develop fast enough, all of this 1 million vehicle capacity and the 100 gigawatt hour battery capacity will be for us. That was kind of his response. So I thought that was potentially. So that was a bit interesting. But I guess it was clear that this is something that NIO is a major participant in, but supposedly other competitors could be using this capacity, both the vehicle and the battery.
The testing.
Yeah, everything else.
Well, the one thing too about this is that, the Hefei government is really wanting to become the EV manufacturing ground zero for China, or one of the ground zeros. And we're seeing that. And they're using NIO and NIO as kind of their anchor tenant to try to recruit suppliers and other OEMs. Whether that's going to work, we'll see. But normally once suppliers or one large manufacturer with a decent amount of volume and capacity enters and breaks ground on a manufacturing facility, suppliers normally, if it's a promising brand, they'll normally come and follow, so to add additional capacity locally. So, the Hefei government is doing their best to become the next generation manufacturing hub for EVs in China. So anything else that stuck out to you during the call that we didn't get to finish listening to?
I guess the other one was the upgradable battery pack. So he said since they started this at the end of 2020, as of April 16th, 10,000 users had kind of upgraded or used a 100 kilowatt hour pack. So that's basically 10% of their existing users, right? So they just recently rolled off the 100,000 car. So that's basically 10%, which is part of the reason why they had these incremental upgrades added into their kind of revenues and margins in Q1, I think. So I think they mentioned this. More than 20%, which is comparable to Tesla, right? I think Tesla was like 25% or 26% vehicle margins, if I remember correctly. So they're up there. And they said, 20% is a really good level right now. And then the other one is basically the chip situation. William mentioned specifically the Renesas fire is going to have an effect for May production due to the lag, right? And then the entire second quarter, the 21,000 to 22,000 was not much of a increase, right? For compared to Q1, which under normal circumstances, without the chip problem, we should see a bit more increase, maybe 25,000 or more, but it's basically flat, right? Compared to Q1.
Yeah, that stuck out to me, the 21,000. So the chip shortage is definitely wreaking havoc on quite a few auto manufacturers. But the other thing was also, to your point, the gross margin. So I did a quick Google search. I think Mercedes-Benz is right around 20%. I think BMW historically is around 18%. So they're doing pretty well. And he said that, they feel pretty good about their margins, but, they're getting to close to 10,000 units a month, which is great. But I think we have to pare down our expectations on the ET7 since it's a $70,000 sedan or $60,000 sedan. So there's just not going to be, that's just not a volume car, not at that price. So for them to get to 12, 15, 20,000 units a month in 18 or 24 months, that ET5 or whatever they're going to call it, because we'll be talking about Skyworth in a little bit, but the ET5 branding, the product name has been taken by Skyworth now. So I don't know what they'll be calling the smaller sedan.
I just realized that. You made a good point. Yeah.
So could it be ET6? No, I don't know. But that's the only way I think that they're going to get to be able to fill that 1 million units of capacity at NIO Park and NIO Park to get that ET5 on the road pretty quickly over the next 12 or 18 months. So they've announced that they are producing or they're doing research and development on a small vehicle in the Hefei Engineering Center. So, slow and steady, it seems like they think is going to win the race. But they're also, as you'd mentioned earlier, going to make a big announcement in early May about what's going on in Norway. I believe they've opened a NIO house. They're shipping a swapping station, and they'll be using that as a marketing tool in the NIO house in Norway. I don't know if there's any other announcements being planned, but my moles are out there trying to figure out what the rumors are. So yeah, I think...
Yeah, I think for the Norway, we'll definitely hear more details next week on the 6th. But it's pretty much an open secret now that there will be a first NIO house in Oslo. They'll bring the battery swap station over there. and then just deciding which model or models to put out on the market first.
The other thing too about Norway, it's technically entering the EU or the European market, maybe not the EU, the European market. But again, we're talking a couple 100,000 units of volume capacity. So it's not going to move the needle. So it's more symbolic and a real dipping a toe in the water type of transaction for NIO more than anything else. Now, is it going to be easier for them to enter the rest of the EU via Norway? Perhaps. But, I don't know how much impact that's going to make outside of marketing that they're actually an international brand now. But research in Norway could give them a lot of insights into the rest of Europe. So I think there's some value in it.
Yeah, and Norway is also the most liberal, right? Out of all the European markets, by far the highest share of EVs, xEVs, so to say. I think in March, only like less than 10% of the market was entirely pure ICE vehicles. Everything else was either plug-ins or battery electric vehicles. And XPeng is there, right? BYD is going over there. So I feel like Norway today is sort of like the China in the, 90s when the joint venture started. And it's like, come in, hey, the foreign brands, come in. We have all these, policies in place, tax-wise or anything else, preferential policies to attract these new players. And it's in the EV age, the only thing you have to get over is the quality and the perception, also the local type approval requirements, EU type approval, and that's been much easier for EVs. And also considering that all these startups, they are already, when they started the company, NIO, XPeng, they have these teams already in place. Right, we talked about this, that when NIO started early, Martin Leach, based out of the UK, right, was, a crucial part of that beginning. Having that presence from the beginning to take those local European requirements in place during development of the ESA 6, right? So they had a head start. It's not like just, this market is open, we're going to get in. So they've been preparing.
A couple things that I'll mention about Norway is that they're giving Norwegian citizens a ton of money in incentives to buy EVs. They're using a lot of that oil money that they have to subsidize the purchase of EVs on behalf of Norwegians. I talked to a friend of mine who used to live here in Beijing. He moved back to Norway, and he asked me, okay, what kind of electric car should I buy? And he kind of told me, and I was like, don't you have a car? And he alluded to the fact that they're essentially giving him the car for free with all the credits that he's getting, with all the subsidies, and then with all the EV charging, the free EV charging, that it made a ton of sense for him to get one just to have a second car. And then with regards to the UK, with them Brexiting, what we're going to start to see is this separation between the traditional EU and the UK. The UK is going to compete. They're also going to compete, like you said, with the EU and Norway, because the UK, there's about 2.5 million units of sales volume in the UK alone. So that much volume merits local capacity being built, whether it's battery capacity, whether it's manufacturing capacity. So they're going to compete against the EU and some of these other within the EU for China EV companies. So there needs to be strategic decisions to be made. The one challenge for UK versus the EU is right-hand drive versus left-hand drive. So there needs to be some early decision making being made at the central offices before they go out and say, I'm going to build 150,000 units of capacity in the UK versus in Germany, France, or Spain, because we're going to have to actually deal with right-hand drive versus left-hand drive. So there's testing involved. There's making sure that there's a market for their vehicles, and then how to market and sell within the UK versus all these different EU countries. So the other thing that kind of stood out to me about the NIO was their cash position. They seem to have a pretty decent amount of cash, $7 billion US, whatever that translates into. In RMB, I converted it
roughly 50 billion
to 7 billion,
RMB,
which is yeah, that's right. So so that's a pretty decent cash position for them. I don't think they're going to be worried about funding and being able to expand at all. Not with that cash position. I know that there's a lot of EV companies out there that are pretty envious of how much money they have. So how about we move on to Tesla? What's been going on over the last couple of weeks? And maybe you can give them some background, at least on the Chinese side, with what you're seeing on the local social media here.
Yeah, sure. Just one more thing on NIO we forgot to mention is going back to that capacity and mass market brand thing. So William, he did not directly answer. There was a question asked in a call about this mass brand possibility, where he responded by saying that the most impressive car he saw was the Baojun Kiwi EV in the $10,000 range. And he said in that particular market, the Chinese brands had innovated quite a few star products, like the Hongguang Mini EV, right? So he did not specifically answer the questions, but I think he was hinting that this is something that they will have to look into eventually, if not already. Especially concerning.
Oh, that means they're looking into it already. That means they're looking into it already.
Right, the capacity, how to imagine selling 1 million ES8s, right? So I think they're onto something that will, as we go forward, we will see more details come out. And he also mentioned this in the previous earnings call, but he said, currently we're going to focus on the ABBs, right? The premium brands, part of the market. But, this is, they have to, look into it very seriously now when we ramp up.
Well, NIO is pushing the ABBs in China, at least, right? Because BMW is kind of a mess. They're they're basically bolting on electric motors and batteries to their current ICEs, so they don't miss the market, but they need to reset. They had the i3 and the i8. They didn't do anything with that. Now they're scrambling a bit because they're overpricing their current EVs, and so we'll see how it goes. I think NIO is going to do fine against the ABBs here because, again, if we're looking at just specifically the luxury premium segment, there's millions of units of sales volume there. And so everybody could grow still, right? So they're not competing directly and customer acquisition costs are still fairly low. So I did a presentation last night about specifically NIO and how it's kind of transformed, one of the companies that's transforming China. One of the things that I emphasized was the fact that early on, they invested heavily in branding, design, and customer engagement. And to your point, they had offices in Germany, they had offices in Silicon Valley. And so they spent their cash burn rate when they started out was just crazy, ridiculous, too much. Hired a bunch of people very quickly. And it put them in dire straits, right? In late 2019, their share price was $1.19. Hefei government comes in early 2020, injects $1.4 billion into them. Now we're seeing that investment from early on in design and branding and customer engagement start to pay off, right? Because this community via the app that they have, I was interviewed for a Reuters article. There's 150,000 users on this app, right? So they've sold since inception, they've sold less than 100,000 cars, but there's 150,000 people on this app. You can buy shoes on it. You can go to a NIO house.
I'm one of them.
This is starting to pay off, right?
You are? I bought a couple of lifestyle products on there.
But so this is the thing, right? And the other part last night that I mentioned was that houses and cars, those are the emotional buys in most people's lives, right? And so guess what? If I engage this customer early, introduce my brand to them, introduce my brand values to them via this app, and then they can go to a NIO house and really feel it physically, this is going to pay off for them, right? Now, don't get me wrong, innovation, product, pricing, and positioning is going to keep them going, and it's going to hopefully, for them anyways, get them past the 6, 7, 8,000 vehicles per month mark and get them higher to 12, 13, 14,000. I think a lower price vehicle is going to really jumpstart them getting into the 14, 15,000 units per month sales volume. But these are the things that are lacking with a lot of the current EV startups. They haven't invested as much in the branding and the customer engagement, and it's starting to show, because once the ABBs come in, the Teslas come in that have that established brand, it just boxes everybody out. But it's not going to box NIO out because there's familiarity with it. So again, I just wanted to kind of make an explanation or explain that I think the NIO brand is actually it resonates pretty well with the customer here in China. And whether that travels, I don't know.
Yeah, William did mention in the call that in a question on competition, that in a specific segment that NIO is in, he said to this day, there's not yet a competitor that has the comprehensive, that competitiveness that NIO has. It's everything around product, tech, service, user experience, app, community. There's no one that can compete. So that was his comment.
But one thing, they will try, because when I was at the Shanghai Auto Show, I wanted to buy a little car at Tank or whatever, a little tchotchke at Xiaopeng, and guess what? I had to scan a QR code and buy the product via the app, kind of like you did, right? With your NIO purchases, right? So everybody's still going to try, that's for sure. So let's move on to Tesla, man.
Yeah, so I feel like this is talking part 3 of our Auto Shanghai recap. For those of you who've joined us the last couple of times, we went through the foreign brands and the Chinese brands, and we specifically did not want to talk Tesla. But it's been 10 days since the protest incident. I would figure that most people may have heard about this, but it's still transpiring, and I said it's becoming the international mystery of the year for the reasons that to this day, there's still no outright verdict on who is at fault. So just quickly going through the entire incident, basically the lady surnamed Zhang climbed up onto a Model 3 at the Tesla booth at the Shanghai Auto Show and started shouting, the Tesla brakes are malfunctioning. And she had a T-shirt on. And that photo of her with the white T-shirt and the Tesla logo and also the Geely logo in the background became a viral photo that was circulated, globally by now. So a couple of hours after this happened, she obviously got taken away, dragged away by security.
She went to jail for 5 days.
Yeah, it was like detention for 5 days. A couple of hours after this happened, their Tesla China VP Grace Tao did a interview with Caijing, credible media outlet in China, and she said what I think really turned this whole thing to a different direction was that we never compromise. And second, things that this lady who stood on the car has been the cause of all our PR problems. That's what she said. And soon after, the couple of days later, well, on the same day, Tesla issued a statement also saying that they will never compromise because they believe that they weren't.
Well, that was probably approved by Gao.
They weren't at fault.
That was probably approved by the VP.
Because the single word of using this phrase of not compromising later on, the state media, Xinhua, even there's the organization that deals with corruption even issued a long article.
Yeah.
And then Tesla had to issue 2 separate statements, saying sorry and all that. And then they a few days later.
And then they would address customer. They would address or reinforce customer.
Yeah, and then they issued
stuff,
a statement with a screenshot of all the data that they had 30 minutes prior to the accident. By the way, the accident happened on February 21st, and this lady has been protesting ever since. She wanted a full refund, basically. And she did not want to use any third-party appraisal organizations that will deal with, looking at what happened, which Tesla wanted to do, and it never happened. So this thing dragged on. She kept protesting at the dealers in her, where this happened near Zhengzhou in Henan province, and then ended up doing the same thing in Shanghai Auto Show. And when Tesla released this screenshot of this data, she was still in the detention, right? She came out after 5 days and she said, "Hey, Tesla, I didn't authorize you to release this data to the public." And this is where we stand right now. Now
it becomes a privacy issue.
Yeah. So I think
because
this
the data showed that the person who was driving, who was her father
of this lady,
was speeding, right?
That's purportedly
the data showed that he was speeding, right?
And according to the accident report, I think the car first it was driving on this Guodao, which is like it's not expressway. It's not like highways here in the U.S. It's like a, what do you call it? No, it's like a local road, Guodao. It's like a secondary road, and
where street, just
where speed limits are usually probably 60 to 80 kilometers an hour. And the report basically said the car was traveling at 118 kilometers per hour. And when the car finally stopped, the speed was at about 48 kilometers an hour. And he had hit two cars and hit a curb and finally stopped. So I think now how I look at this incident is there's two things. I think one, there's a PR issue. I think is what kind of turned this thing to a totally different direction. And second, again, we talked about this many times. This is not a Tesla issue. This is an issue about these smart EVs having all these features, sensors, and data. In China, even there's not a single third-party organization that is able to go back and deal with the data. First, it's not a, you can't just like an ICE vehicle that you can go and appraise the data. And Tesla, basically, they have the data, they can manipulate the data, right? This is the trust issue that's from the lady's perspective, that I cannot trust you to have a third-party organization that will have a credible, finding that is worthy of the trust of all the public. And this is kind of at a standstill. So now, I think just a couple of days ago, the CAAM, the Automotive Manufacturing Association, they announced a thing related to blockchain of like some sort of a data inspection or monitoring platform using blockchain. And I'm not going into the details, but basically it's one solution for this type of thing. And I just personally think that from a PR standpoint, even if as a company, right, you always say customer is the God, or even if you have your own, you draw a line, right, but you don't publicly really say we never compromise, or this lady, all the negative that Tesla is, all the negative press that Tesla has been getting is from this lady. When you say that,
but this is part of their challenge, right? Because they don't have a PR team, right? So let me chime in here a little bit. So whether I'm not here to tell you who's at fault and who's not at fault, but there is an industry of lawyers. There's an industry of these types of situations where people get together and try to bully a brand or blackmail a brand, and there's lawyers that help them do that. So I'm not saying she's the one, but there's also, on the other side of what Lei is saying, there's also rumors that, okay, there's a brand, there's an EV company, there's a competitor that hired her to do this.
Yeah, NIO and Webasto got into
there's a whole industry. Yeah, they had to send denials.
Yeah, they had to issue statements because rumors said the lady was in a NIO going to the Shanghai Auto Show, and she had used a media badge provided by Webasto, which is a supplier to NIO. So, yeah.
Oh my God. So you peel the layers of the onion back, and it's not as simple as it sounds, especially because there's so much chatter on social media in China that it's just very difficult to parse what is going on in reality, number one. And then number two, a couple things. She's in a tier 2 or tier 3 city, right? I don't know if her going to, or if living in Shanghai, Beijing, Guangzhou, or Shenzhen would have helped her situation. But Gao, this woman, this vice president, I think she was previously in state media. So I'm 100% certain she overplayed her hand, right? But there is truly an issue with Tesla in not only China, but in the United States as well, where they're outselling their service cover. Right? So this is a real issue for them. This is not something that's made up. Whether they decide to make the necessary investment to catch up their service centers, their service teams in order to remedy these solutions. Sometimes it's as easy as just massaging egos, right, Lei? And obviously, instead of massaging egos, this woman, or the vice president for Tesla, Gao, decided that she just wanted to poke these people in the eye. And, why state media got involved, I'm not sure. Maybe, again, she overplayed her hand and the state media was like, you know what, we can't let you just make these types of statements without, slapping you on the wrist. Okay. So, but that's not to say that Tesla is the only company that has customer service issues either, right? Because on Weibo, there are plenty of complaints about other brands as well. But because she danced on a Model 3's rooftop at the Shanghai Auto Show, it was magnified exponentially globally. So that's kind of how I look at it a little bit at the highest level. But they do have a PR challenge and they do have a service challenge for sure.
Yeah, and also the fact that she said, the English translation is that we will not compromise. But the Chinese, when you say 不妥协, that sounds just more
mean.
Yeah, maybe mean is not the right word, but it just sounds much more serious than saying we're not going to compromise somehow in Chinese. And
if she had a PR manager in Shanghai sitting next to her, they would not have let her said that, right? We know this, right? And so she was very, very firm about it. And maybe that was the last straw or the straw that broke the camel's back.
And also, since that incident, there have been quite a few more of these Teslas speeding into crowds, or I have to put...
Well, even coffee shops,
even
right?
Restrooms. In the countryside. I want to put some, salt on this, put a grain of salt on this. I can't say for sure that these are all Tesla problems or the driver owner problems. Because Tesla, it's such a, right? We talk about them being the catfish in the pool of sardines. And this huge catfish sort of somehow, I think in the Chinese eye, it's not so much, maybe it's their vehicle problems. They might have quality issues, but it's also the way that they've treated, the way they've responded. PR being one type, they responded to these quality issues, and also early in the year, right? They had to make a forced recall after 5 government level regulators made an announcement. Basically, Tesla was summoned to do this recall. So this catfish is all of a sudden I think in the eyes, at least in China, that you're becoming a bit too cocky, maybe.
But I also think.
Yeah, and some of the things that you're doing are not the right way of, proper way of operating in China. I think that's the sense that we get.
I think that goes without question, but I also want to say that I think there's some practicality to that too, right? Because it remains to be seen. Let's wait for 3 months and see what Q2 numbers are, sales numbers for Tesla, to see if this has any material effect. Number one, I think over the next couple of weeks, it should blow over a little bit, I think. And then number two, the why I said that there's some probably practical reasons that they made these warnings to Tesla. Number one, generally, they saw the market increasing overall for EVs. And so I think this was kind of a warning to the entire sector from the 5 regulators, using Tesla as the example. And then number two, for Tesla's particular reason, they knew that the Model Y was launching, and the Model Y is anticipated to sell at almost a 2-to-1 ratio versus the Model 3. And so if they have a service center shortfall and customer service gap already, if the Model Y ramps and goes to the sales volume that they're expecting it to, the Chinese government as well as Tesla, and they're not able to, and the gap widens between customer service centers and sales volume, then it's only going to create even more issues, right? And so I think there was really a practical issue with that. But, 2 weeks ago.
Mm-hmm. I still believe we talked about this. I don't think this incident will affect sales that much. Looked at it opposite way, it's free advertisement. So I don't think it will affect their sales that much in China. But having said that, I think what I want to say was, I'm not going to stand on the side of the lady. Neither am I going to stand on the side of Tesla. This is not a Tesla issue. This is an issue for what happens when a smart EV goes into this quality debate and mystery, where and if a third party, similar to NTSB or NHTSA here in the US, a credible third party that are able to get into, find out from the data and issue something that everybody feels trusted. Until that happens, right? It's not a Tesla issue. It's going to be everybody's issue.
Yeah, and the last thing I'll say about this is William Li was interviewed right after, and he was asked the question about NIO specifically, but in reference to Tesla, and he leaned into, we are a customer-oriented company, right? So, what our customers want is what we're going to do. So he definitely wanted to stay very clear from what's going on with Tesla and emphasize the fact that they're a customer-oriented brand, a customer-oriented company. And so what I think you'll see even more in order to try to differentiate themselves between EV companies and Tesla is that there's going to be even more emphasis placed on how Tesla is not a customer-friendly company versus, and this is a blanket statement for most of the premium EV companies here in China, that they're going to really lean into that and try to position Tesla as this cold, non-customer service-oriented company. So,
well, they also issued an interesting statement saying that their owners support them and their owners, did you see that, right? Their owners sent their Starbucks coffees, and they showed these receipts with, you can look at them in detail, and the date and the times are all, I won't go into it, but I mean, the people are really picky about details. So,
Sure.
But I think, the state administration for market regulation, they've already made a statement urging the Zhengzhou quality supervision to deal with this, and Tesla basically has heeded whatever requirements of releasing data, things like that. So we'll see what happens. Just this lady is just really tough, I guess.
Yeah.
Not budging.
Well, I don't know how much longer they can survive without some form of official communications team, because they don't, number one, they're not very media friendly here and in the United States. And I don't know how long that can last without them getting more and more people against them. But let's talk Skyworth. Let's talk, I don't know what to call them. Skyworth? Skywell? You know, so you tell us a little bit about Skyworth, because I do know what that brand is, but you can explain it a little bit further.
Skyworth, believe it or not, they claim to be the global number one in TV, what do you call it? TV setup boxes or TV, you know what I'm saying? Top boxes?
Yes.
They claim that they're number one, and they're the number 4 TV maker globally. So
do they contract manufacture?
I don't know, but that's their claim. So this is an interesting guy who started this company. There's 3 TV brands in China: Skyworth, Konka, and then TCL, right? And it so happened that this guy, who started Skyworth, Huang Hongsheng, was in the same class as 2 other guys that started the other 2 brands at the China South University of Technology in the 70s, late 70s. I think they were the class of 82 or something. And then the 3 of them all started TV brands. He's 65 years old, and he actually, in 2010 or 11, he actually served prison time before that. For some reason, I don't remember, but he came out, and then he invested into a company, it's called Skywell. The Chinese entity is basically Nanjing Kinglong. So he formed a investment company for like $1 billion RMB, and then he went into this joint venture with Kinglong to set up this new commercial EV company called Skywell. That's 10 years ago. And then in 2019, he moved into the electric passenger vehicle with the electric ET5, right? ET5, not NIO is coming out with the ET5, but and then that car didn't really sell that well. I think they only sold a few hundred units. So what he ended up doing a couple of days ago to announce the Skyworth brands, not so much announce that Skyworth is going into the smart EVs, but basically transfer the Skyworth branding to the Skywell that's been in existence for 10 years. They were they had good volumes in the electric bus and van space. And now he's just, announced this new Skyworth branding, Skyworth Auto.
And let me interrupt you really quickly. We should mention that the ET5, I think, went on sale mid last year, and the pricing is around 160,000 RMB to about 250,000 RMB. So So for them to only get hundreds of sales is actually pretty pathetic. It's that's pretty anemic, But I looked at the website, and now Skywell turns to Skyworth, but everybody and their mother are getting into the act, and so this low end. And I know there's a couple guys on this chat, or a few people on this chat, that are particularly interested in the lower end market here in China. It's going to be brutal. It's going to be so competitive. There's going to be just cutthroat competition at that level, sub 200, 250, 275,000 RMB. And there has to be dozens of brands right now that are selling at the 150 to 200,000 RMB. None of them that we'll talk about in this chat, because they're not worth talking about yet. But yeah, we brought this up because we all thought it was a little bit funny, a little bit ironic. But I don't know that much about them.
And then going back a little bit more about the history is that 2010, 2011 is when China started that 10 city, 1,000 EV project, right? Where you pick cities to pilot, demonstrate the operation and commercialization of EVs. And I think this might be one of the reasons that Huang, the chairman, decided to go into electric buses and vans, which in the early days enjoyed huge subsidies, which is phasing out next year. But by the end of the last decade, those subsidies were gone. Those good times are gone. I guess he pivoted. To smart EVs, and starting last year and this year with this whole new manufacturing movement, Skyworth is just one of these new players that we're not even surprised anymore.
Well, so one thing I will say,
they already had the experience manufacturing EVs for 10 years. Just a matter of moving into the PVs.
The last thing I'll say about this is that I think he announced that they were going to be a top 10 global automaker. So they need to get on it if they're going to do that. Yeah, I don't know how do you get 100 units to a few 100,000 in a short period of time, but without a ton of investment.
That brings us to the end of this week's show. Lei and I thank you for tuning in. My name is Tu Lee, and you can find me on Twitter at Sino Auto Insight. That's SinoAutoInsight. You can find Lei on Twitter at LeiXing77. That's LEIXING77. If you wouldn't mind rating and or reviewing us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you grab your podcast from, we'd appreciate that as well. Even better, if you enjoy this show, please tell your friends about it. Please join us again next week as we track down all the latest news on China, EVs, and more.